Hi, I'm John Glynn. I've been asked by a number of students about dropping skies into photographs, and so I've got my picture here of the Forth Rail Bridge near Edinburgh, and it's a lovely sunny day, but the sky is fairly bland, being just a plain blue sky, and it'd be quite nice if we could have clouds added into the picture. So I've got a couple of pictures in the photo bin. This is Photoshop elements I'm using, but the technique I'm going to show you could be used in the professional version as well, for that matter. It makes no difference on the version itself, but as most of my students have got Photoshop elements, it makes sense to use that particular version to show this technique. Now what I'm going to do for dropping the sky in is I'm going to show you a couple of ways actually. But the aim of doing this is to try and keep it simple and make it as quickly as possible. But it is a complicated process and is certainly not for the complete beginner. Okay, so you may find that you need to watch this video a couple of times to get a full understanding of what I'm doing. Hopefully we'll explain it as simple as possible. I'm going to start by having to take out the sky. Okay, so in my layers palette I've got my background layer, that's my picture, and I'm going to go to the eraser tool, and in the eraser tool there is a thing called background eraser. So I'm going to show you that you could use this particular technique to take out some of the sky. There may be better ways, and I'm going to show you a better way, but just to start with I'll show you this way because it might work for what you're wanting to use it for, and you might find that it's good enough if you like, and it's fairly quick. So if I use the background eraser tool, in it you have a tolerance level at the very bottom here, and you have a size of brush and a thing called contiguous and discontiguous. Okay, so if we stick with what I've got, I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to make it easier to understand what it's doing. I can use the control key and the plus sign for zooming in. I can then hold down the left mouse key and I can start erasing the background. Okay, it sees a colour, and sure enough it will take out the background. And if I hold down the Alt key, it will give me a colour selection, so it knows that's the colour I want to take out. So it gives me a pipette by holding the Shift key down, and it might help in finding the edges so it doesn't automatically take out everything else. However, just because I've told it what colour to choose doesn't mean it won't take out other things because of my tolerance levels. Remember, the tolerance is on the bottom left here of my monitor, and as I hold down the left mouse key, you'll notice it also takes out the bridge, which isn't what I was wanting it to do. So I'll undo that little selection and I'll reduce the tolerance level, and as long as I reduce it quite significantly, it might then not take out the bridge, and that's because it knows to take out the sky. Okay, and if I go up to the main sky bit of the picture, sorry I'm moving my mouse all over the shop, hold down my Alt key, I get a little pipette, I can say to the computer pick up that shade of blue, hold down the left mouse key and it can see the bridge, and I can put my mouse over the top and it doesn't remove the total bridge. Now it can work fairly well, and as you move along it can be quite effective. It's quite a slow way of working, but if you've just got trees to deal with in a picture and not a whole bridge, it might be a very quick way of doing it because it'll miss out the twigs but will take out the sky. So it might be more than enough. If you want it to pick up more than just one block, as it's done right now, picked up a block of colour, but you're wanting it to pick up other colours, then going back down to the bottom of your monitor here where it says contiguous and discontiguous, if I click discontiguous instead, of contiguous and hold down the left mouse key, it now lets me move around and it starts to see the difference between the bars. So it doesn't just do a specific area, it does other areas as well. Now, as I said before, it can pick up more than you wish it to pick up. So you have to be fairly careful with this particular tool, because you may find that it also picks up, as it has done here, the sky and the bridge. So it's not 100%, as one can tell, but it, as I say, it might be fine. So that's using the background eraser tool to remove the background, contiguous and discontiguous. Okay, there is an important difference here, because contiguous will just work within a specific shape, a specific area, so and that might be fine. But you, as I said, you may want to work behind twigs, in which case it will be discontiguous you're looking for as well. Okay, but there is another way, which you might find is more useful. So I'm going to go to my history palette or panel and go back a stage. So I'm going to take out the erasers that I've been working with and just say delete the history. Yes. So I'm just back to my original image, and this time, rather than using the background eraser tool, I'm going to go up to my selections, my quick selection options, and under the quick selection option, one of these is called the magic wand. Now the magic wand again works on tolerances, so if it's got a very high number it will make a big selection, and if it's got a very low tolerance it picks up smaller selections. So I'll show you. If I put it at a high selection, a high tolerance, and click the blue sky, which is what I want to select, it picks up the blue sky, and I'll zoom out and you'll see it also picks up a lot of the picture, including the blue sky. You see the marquee all the way around the photograph. So effectively everything that may have a shade of blue and a bit more has been selected. So that's not very useful. So I need to reduce the tolerance, and as I reduce the tolerance and then click in the blue sky with my mouse, it now picks up more of the blue sky and less of anything else. That's not too bad, because in reality I can start to I can remove the stuff down here that it's picked up, but I do actually want it to select that blue sky and more. And again, I've got contiguous and discontiguous down at the bottom here, so I'm going to make sure contiguous is off as it happens, because I want it to, and I'm going to hold the shift key down, so I'm holding the shift key down to get a little plus sign. I can make a bigger selection, and the same at the top right, I want that bit of sky selected as well. And if it has made a too big a selection further down on the sea here, and little dobs of sparkly bits around the picture, I can remove them by jumping over to my quick selection tool, which is the one above the magic wand. And this tool, I'll make a bigger brush, you can see what it looks like, will have a plus sign in it, and if I hold the Alt key down it gives me a minus sign. And if you notice in the bottom here it's got add and subtract. It's basically doing that. I leave it on add all the time. If you watch the add and subtract in the bottom left, when I hold down the Alt key, the alternative key on the keyboard, it jumps to subtract, let go of the Alt key, and it goes back to add. Well, what I actually want to do is subtract. I want to take out the selection down here. That brush is a bit too big, so I'm going to reduce it slightly, maybe not quite so small. And holding down the Alt key, I can get the minus sign. Holding that over the C and holding down the left mouse key at the same time, I can move it around and remove any selections I don't want. So now the only selected area is the sky. Okay, now there may be other bits that I need to look at, because hopefully it's picked up most of the sky, but there are bits which are missing and I may want to include them in. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, so I can go Control plus, and I can just make sure it's picked up the bulk of the information. It doesn't have to pick up everything at this stage, because I can continue working on it later on. It's picked up bits of the bridge, for instance, which I wouldn't necessarily want it to pick up, but it's not the end of the world if it does at this stage, as I've just said. And there may be other bits that I'd like it to pick up here. Now, with this particular tool chosen, which is the quick selection tool, I can keep the quick selection tool on and add to my selection. Okay, by just brushing along with the quick selection tool. It's quite a useful tool to have, and because you can mix and match tools, so with these tools on, I can mix and match. I can just take that selection out. Oh dear, if I over select, mind you, which is what I have done, I would then have to put it back in again, so I'll come back out and show you. The mistake, of course, is I don't actually want that railing to be included in my selection, so I'll need to take that out. So let's just try the magic wand again. No, I won't, because it will take everything off. Start all over again. I will use the Alt key and take out that selection of it, holding down the alternative key on the keyboard gives me that's better. So and then adding to this selection, I can add the sky back in. I'm just using the quick selection tool for this, and I can push that along a little bit. There we are, that's the quickest way. And down here, I want to add to the selection. There we are. I'm just using the quick selection tool to do that. And if I just do if I zoom back in, there's a tiny little bit here which needs to be included in the selection. So if I go and do Control plus Navigator, I can move over to that section there and just use the smaller brush and do plus sign. There we are. That selects that little bit as well, and it selected nearly everything else. That's pretty good going. Now there might be areas I need to refine, and there will be. As time goes by, there will be needing areas to refine the picture, but that's not too bad at the moment. I'm going to just do refine edge though, just to check that everything is okay. I'm going to click on refine edge in the bottom part there, and you can see the mask that I have created. And if we want to see the mask with different ways of viewing it, we can do a little drop down menu on the view section within the masking refine edge. I've got marching ants, which is what we've already had. I've got overlay on black, on white, black and white. Black and white because you might find it easier to see in this way exactly what has been selected by your mask and whether you can refine it. On layers and reveal the layer. Black and white in this case probably is not a bad idea. You can see that it's selected bits here. There's white, and there's bits here which I'd like to not be included in the white. So we have a little selection here which is called Refine Radius tool. If I hold that and I can refine the radius tool, expands the detection area. So I should be able to paint in here and make them black. So that will get rid of those little bits, and that might just improve the selections in general. Actually, that's not bad. It's not bad at all. So I'm just going to say OK to that at the moment. Now, the next thing is actually what I want to actually cut this guy out, but this method I'm going to use won't destroy the picture. Okay, so if I were just to do edit and cut at the moment, sure enough it will remove the sky, but it's destructive. I can't undo any of the effects I'm going to do on it later on. So what I need to do is keep the rest of the picture and take the sky out, but not destroy the underlying photograph. This may sound a bit weird, but I do need to keep the whole photograph and not destroy anything. So although I have selected the sky, I'm not going to keep the sky selected. I'm going to invert it. So I'm going to go to select and inverse. Okay, so when I inverse the selection, it actually now selects the foreground and the bridge and my railing at the top there, so that when I go back into refine edges, I can work on the picture a little bit better. So I'm going to go refine edge. I'm back to what I saw before, but this time I'm going to soften those edges so it doesn't look like I've cut the picture out. I'm going to feather them very slightly and smooth them, just giving a gnat's whisker or softening in the background, so it won't look as though I've cut the sky out so much. And I'm going to also go to the selection option at the bottom here where it says selection and output to. I'm going to output to a new layer and a layer mask. This will mean that the original picture has not been destroyed. So I'm going to click new layer with layer mask and I'm going to say OK. And you'll now see that the sky has been removed, but I've got a new layer. My background is still there, but it has been closed off, it's been turned off, and I've got a mask on my sky. The picture is selected. There's a little blue line running around my photograph. I actually need the selection to be selected, so I need to click that with the left mouse key. I'm using a PC, by the way, and therefore you can see that I've now got a little blue line around my mask, because there's further work I want to do. There's a bit up the top here which I want to take out in the picture above the very top railing, which has got a bit of the old sky, and there may be other bits and pieces that I want to look at in detail. That off the top of the head, looking at the picture, looks like the worst part, but we'll zoom in. I'm going to just zoom in on my navigator to palette there on the left hand side, drag that up, and what I want to do is take this bit out. Now to do this, I'm not going to use my eraser tool. I'm actually going to use the paintbrush. The paintbrush is an extremely useful little tool to use in masking, because it allows me to paint in pictures and paint out pictures, if you like. That background picture that I had in my layers palette next to the mask is the original picture. I haven't destroyed it. So I can go to my mask, for instance, and I'm just clicking the right mouse key, and if I disable the layer mask, I'll show you the photo. It's still there. If I re-enable the layer mask, it takes the sky out. So the actual photograph is still there. This means that I can go up to the top left. This enables me to go to the top left of the picture, go to the paintbrush tool, go to my black and white color palette, color options, switch them over so it's black on the top, and as I move my brush across my my blue sky, the old picture, I can start removing it. Now the brush is a bit big, so the paintbrush, I can reduce the size of the brush, and I also want to up the opacity because I want to remove the old sky completely, and I'm just taking it out, and what I'm going to be left with is a bar. This will give me space for the new sky to come in. again, it doesn't have to be 100% at this stage because we've got the original picture, so I can continue working on things later on. That's the cleverness of masking. Okay, so that's not too bad. As for the bridge itself, I'll zoom out slightly, make it easier to see in a quicker move around. We can get an idea as to what the bridge looks like, and that's pretty clean looking bridge. If you've over softened, by the way, if you've over softened the edges, you feel that actually it looks a bit too hazy, you can at this stage paint them back in by switching the paintbrush colours. Instead of being black and white on the left hand side, white allows more of your original picture back in. In fact, the softening that I've done is not too bad, so it's not overly soft. But if you over soften the edges, when I did the feathering, then it would impact everything. So very, very slight softening of the edges seems to be enough. And it seems to have picked up the bulk of the sky, so that's not been too bad. So now I can come back out. It can take a bit of time to get everything correct. It takes a bit of time to practice on this particular type of thing, so don't expect to be able to do it immediately, and sometimes things will work more quickly than others. If there's a definite edges, it makes life easier for the computer. Okay, so I've got the photo bin and I've got my original picture. I want the sky in the picture now, so I'll go back to my photograph and the photo bin. I'll go into my move tool, and the photograph. So on the move tool, and I'm going to drag this picture, my cloud picture, over the top of my bridge picture, and there you have my clouds. Now you can see that on my layers palette on the right hand side, it automatically creates a new layer with the cloud, and at the moment that's fine because I know it's over the top, but we need to resize this anyway, so I'm going to just push that up to the top there. It can go slightly above the picture and slightly further out. Just means then that I don't lose any edging by accident, nice and clean. And I also don't need it all the way to the bottom because I need to do other work on the clouds. That will look fine in the picture. Nobody knows what the clouds look like anyway, so we just say OK. I need it to be behind the bridge, so I go to my layers palette and I drag the top layer down below the bottom layer, or down below my background copy layer, not the background but the next one there. There we are, that one. So I've got the background copy and the sky. Okay, and I've reduced the size of this pictures to make it easier to work online. Other file sizes were too big, so that's why it says reduced size. So it's sky and then my background copy. Now the sky here needs to be reflected in the water because the water is still reflecting the old sky. So I need to have a look at that. How am I going to get that sky reflected fairly naturally in the water? Well, I'm going to turn off my background copy layer initially, and I've got my sky, and I want to get my sky, and I'm going to duplicate the sky layer. So I go back to my sky layer that I've got, I click the right mouse key, and I'm going to duplicate the layer, and it doesn't matter what you called it, and I'm just going to say copy, and it's going to be OK. I've now got two sky pictures, but I need the top sky picture to reflect the bottom sky picture, and it doesn't at the moment. It's just a straight copy. So if what we want to do is actually turn it upside down so that it mirrors the top layer. So to do that, there's a tiny circle. This is very, very difficult to see, but there is a tiny circle down here, which if I click once with the left mouse key and put my mouse over the top of the picture, you see I get a green tick appearing. Click the right mouse key now, and I've got my mouse over the photograph. It allows me to flip the layer vertically. If I flip it vertically, it gives me a mirror image of the sky. Okay, and it's now approximately in the right position, and I can say yes. Now I've got two of the same pictures, one upside down as opposed to the other in the layers palette. I want to merge these two layers so they become one. To do that, I select both of those layers using the shift key. So all I do is go down to the bottom, the layer below, hold down the shift key, click once, and it selects both those layers, so they're both highlighted. I've got a choice here. I can click the right mouse key and say merge layers, or I can go up to my layer palette and say merge layers. I've got a choice. Merge layers is what you want to do, whichever way you do it, and I now have one complete image and one layer. I can now turn on my bridge picture again. So there is my sky, with underneath that sea will be a portion of that sky. To be able to see this, I'm going to go back to my bridge background, my background copy, and my mask. So I'm highlighting the mask and getting a blue line around the mask, and then I'm going to go back to my paintbrush, and I need to make sure that I've got black and white, because black is going to let me see through and white is going to block it, as it does in the mask. If you look back at the mask, white blocks, black allows through, so I can see the sky through the black. And I want to see my new sky behind the sea, so I'm going to make a bigger brush, and I'm going to show you what happens next. Now, oh dear, that's over the top, isn't it? If I just use it straight away, you can see that that sky is definitely coming through into the water. The drawback is it doesn't look very realistic, and that's because if you go down to my brush options in the bottom here, I have opacity, and the opacity is nearly 100%, so I need to reduce that opacity. So I'm going to undo that sky, reduce the opacity so it's no longer ludicrously taking over the whole photograph. I'm going to look at the brush. You can reduce the size of the brush by dragging along on the bar, or you can reduce it or resize it by using your brackets on the keyboard. So I'll resize the brush, and I just want to make sure that it will be of a size like that, which will make it reasonable. And the opacity is not too high, remember, so that when I allow the picture to come through from below, it looks fairly natural. It's just to get a tonal range. I can work on it a bit more, and that new colour might then start to look like more of that sort of sky colour at the top, okay, rather than the old colouring. What I'll do to show you the difference is if I go to my original background on the layer palette and double click it, I can then release it from its lock, and I can drag that to the very top, and then you can see the original photo, and that's the new photo. So you can see the difference. Now that sky that I've got coming into the picture is not necessarily the right sort of shade that you'd want for your picture, so you can continue working on it. To do that, I can go back to my sky photograph, which I have now at the bottom on my palette, and I can adjust the colour and strength of colour by going into the adjustment layer options. Create a new fill or adjustment layer with a little circle, blue and white circle icon. Go to hue and saturation, and I can reduce the saturation or change the hue of that sky and or the lightness of it, and by just moving things around a bit you can change the way that that sky might look to the whole photo. And this is the sort of thing that you might work on for quite a while to get the right sort of shade of blue that you're looking for, to make it look natural to your lighting that you had on the day. It's worth having a selection of skies. I'll just lighten it a bit. Okay, so you can try that, and again you can turn that on and off to get an idea. That layer can be switched on and off to get an idea of what it looks like with and without. I prefer it with. And it looks fairly natural because it no longer has that funny sharp line along the horizon when it's on. It sort of fits in with the tonal ranges that should be there, if you like. What I have now got, of course, is a nice cloudy day rather than just a pure blue sky, a bit more interest in the sky. So basically by using these various tools I can work on improving the photograph. There are issues with this funny sort of line at the top here, which is not perfectly straight, for instance, as a railing. So that again being the mask, and it might be that I would have to zoom in to that particular part of the picture, looking at that edge, and see that it's still got the previous picture in it. So I've got to start working on that, and again I can do that through the paintbrush. So if I reduce the size of my brush, I can allow the new sky to come in, and it might be that I have to up the opacity or change the opacity slightly on the paintbrush just so that it looks more natural. It's sort of thing which you'd have to work on. Again, taking out some of the former sky so that it's not impacting the look of this picture, and you'd work along your edges, tidying them up. Until such time that you find that it starts to look more natural. It's the sort of thing which you work on and work on and work on, and you take time over, which in a tutorial is a bit more difficult to do. So you'd work along your lines, trying to take out the obvious mistakes or obvious bits which aren't quite fitting into the look of the picture. So people are then looking at parts of your photograph, they're not thinking, oh, you've been worked on. The idea is to try and make it look like it hasn't been worked on, not that it has, usually. And again, up the top here you might work on putting in, not having too much of a shaky hand does help. But it's feasible to work on your picture and add new parts to the picture as you go along. Let's just do that. And it might be that you need to have 100% opacity rather than just bits of opacity otherwise it can look like you've added a horizon line and a landscape in. A little bit more work on it is probably necessary, but you can see that already it's a little bit more straight than it was originally. And so you would work on your picture until you get it pretty much finalized. So there we have been using a sky image, a background image. We quickly used a combination of the magic wand and also the quick selection tool to make an initial selection of the sky. We inversed that selection so that when we picked it up, the foreground, the bridge and the railings, we then made a selection, a refined edge selection, which meant that we could then create a mask on a new selection, on a new layer. So you want a new layer with a mask. This is non-destructive, and that means that we can go back to the original image, which is still here, and add into that picture and take out the picture without losing any of the original photograph. So that's why it's non-destructive. And we can also create a new hue and saturation layer just for the sky alone. Okay, so it gives us quite a lot of control over our photograph. So, but it's not quick. It does take time to do this sort of work, and it may take a bit of practice. So give yourself plenty of time. Don't rush it. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and hopefully you got an idea of what the picture now looks like from the original to the new version.